Welcome back to my shop. So I made a couple changes. New LED lights, I got them at Costco, $35 a piece. They're bright, they're nice. I'm running 3 main lights now, and I'll have 4. And then I have these 2 lights on an angle, and they're for fill lights for my filming and stuff. And I could turn those on and off separately. So as I'm making some improvements in here, one of the things that has been bothering me for a while in my shop is my router table door. I built this router table slash table saw center, and it works great, and I love it. There's just a couple issues with it. When I built it, I used Home Depot cheap grade ply. I was just getting into woodwork. In fact, that was built way before the podcast. And I used like a $20 sheet of plywood, and the whole time it was just basically trying to bend it back into some sort of straightness. And if you look at the door, this is what's really bothering me here, is this door. It's bowed, it's bent, you can really see what that plywood's like. I catch my knee on it, it opens all the time when I walk by. It's not very versatile, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to redo this door. But I want to do it a couple ways. It's going to be made out of maple, and the panel is going to be somewhat thick because on the inside I'm going to put angled router bit storage so I can just keep some router bits and stuff on the door. Right now I just kind of throw them in there. This way we can kind of have a nice place for me to stick the router bits. I open the door, can look at them, and then figure out what we need instead of just throwing them there in a pile of sawdust. So let's get started on this door. The boards I'm using for the rails and stiles is too wide for the joiner. I need to flatten the boards so I can safely run it through my table saw. Since my table saw kickback accident, I'm very leery about using my table saw. In fact, I think it's trying to kill me, so I use every safety precaution to keep its murderous glances at bay. Now the board is stable enough to run through the table saw. I can go ahead and rip out the rails and stiles. At the joiner, I jointed 2 faces for a square edge. Then I ran it through the planer, making the other 2 faces square to the first 2. I had these boards for the panels left over from another project. I marked them with a cabinet maker's triangle. These boards were under 6 inches, so I could just run them over the joiner. I squared up 2 edges and check the joints for a tight fit. I brought the top side of the board parallel to the jointed bottom. Added ample amount of glue to the edges of the boards and tightened them up in the clamps. And set the panel aside to cure. Now on to the inner workings of the door. These boards are being dimensioned for the inside blocks that hold the bits. I'm gluing the 2 boards together to make a thicker block that will get mounted to the inside of the panel. You will see how these come together in part 2 of this video. Now I'm going to cut the rails and stiles to rough length, removing the planer snipe from the boards. This will also cut away the excess wood, leaving less to run through the router. Okay, here's where I'm making a bonehead move. See the screw? Also a climb cut equals one dumb guy. Back to the table saw, where I usually cut my dados and rabbets. I've always felt safer cutting them here with a dado blade. Now I cut the rails and stiles to their final length. I like using a stop block to ensure that the pieces are identical length. Now I make the cuts. I'm now going to set up my crosscut sled to cut the 10-inch shoulders. Using another stop block ensures that the 10-inch shoulders are cut exactly the same way. I'm using a tenon jig that I bought at Grizzly. These work great for tenons and are reasonably priced. When I bought mine, it cost me around 60 bucks, but worth it. It makes repetitive, quick, accurate tenons. The tenons were a little long, so I cut them to the right length for the dados using my crosscut sled and another stop block. I did a dry fit to check the joints. Everything looked good, so I set them aside for use in a later step. All the glued up parts have cured, and it's now time to take them out of the clamps. I used the dry fit rails and stiles to mark where to cut the panel. I add the depth of the rabbet to the trace line, minus a little for expansion. Over at the table saw, I cut the door panel down to final dimension. Using a shop-made panel sled allows me to cut the panel safely at the table saw. It was easy to make and a great addition to any shop. I started to sand the panel flat. It was taking forever to sand, but then I realized an old school approach might work a little better, so I grabbed for my hand planes. Hand planes are my only option. This panel is way too large to fit through any of my machinery. And by the looks of my gut in these shots, I could use the exercise. Now that the majority of the material has been removed by the hand planes, I can go back to the belt sander for finishing, and then to the random orbit sander for the finer grits. The panels now head back over to the table saw. Using a dado blade, I cut the rabbets so the panels will fit in the dados cut into the rails and stiles. With a dry fit of the panel, I noticed that I needed to cut the rabbets wider, so back at the table saw to make the adjustments. Let's go ahead and glue up the panel. Glue up the rails and stiles, but no glue on the panel. You want the panel to float because of the expansion and contraction. I went ahead and squared up the panel and set it aside to dry. I'm going to end this one here. Next time, we'll make the storage elements and hang the door. Until next time, thanks for coming to my shop.